If you're dealing with an autoimmune disease or some sort of chronic illness, you've most likely looked into different diets. And depending on what you research online and what doctor you go to, you will find different recommendations. Over the last 4 years, I've been dealing with an autoimmune that affects the joints in my hands. And I have tried different diets as well as read a lot of different books to try to figure out which diet would work better for me and would give me some types of relief. And I made the choice to go on a meat-heavy diet. Here's why. First of all, it seems like everybody agrees that removing processed food is the most important thing to do if you're dealing with autoimmune. That is like the first step. So that means removing fast foods, removing processed sugar, so that's white sugar or high fructose corn syrup, and removing processed carbs. And when you start to read the labels of the food that we tend to eat daily, you realize that's a lot of them. Another thing that most doctors seems to agree on when dealing with an autoimmune and trying to clean up your diet is the recommendation of removing most grains and especially wheat. Because for some reason, wheat in the US is different than in Europe. You often hear people that are gluten intolerant in the United States, and then they go to France and they eat all the croissant and all the bread that they want and they don't have any issues. I believe it has to do with the different type of wheat and how it's cultivated in the US versus how it's cultivated in Europe. Now, removing grains and wheat usually means removing all breads, oats, pseudograin, so stuff like quinoa and buckwheat, even though they don't have gluten in them. And usually by doing that, you're already removing a lot of food out of your diets. So if you remove processed food like junk food, processed sugar, processed carbs, you remove all wheat and grains, usually you already have a much cleaner diet, and these foods tend to make your autoimmune worse. And if you do that, you basically start what's called a paleo diet, which is a diet that I did for a while. I actually read this book from Dr. Ballantyne, and it's called The Paleo Approach to Reverse Autoimmune Diseases. And this is basically a really big book, very informative, and it kind of tells you everything you need to know about the paleo approach and how it's actually very good at helping reverse autoimmune. On this diet, you're basically eating foods that come in their natural forms. So it's usually meat, fish, vegetables, fruits, nuts, and certain starches like sweet potatoes and certain root veggies like jicama, for example. Eggs, although they're part of a paleo diet, she does not recommend them. She thinks that eggs, when it comes to dealing with autoimmune disease, tend to aggravate it. So you're not supposed to eat eggs if you follow this diet. But if you're perfectly healthy, then eggs are great. I did this diet for a couple months and I definitely saw some type of relief, but I was still having a lot of random flare-ups. So it pushed me to go a little bit more restrictive with the diet. And this is where I went on a more restrictive paleo diet, where I started to remove nuts as well. So at that point, I was only eating meat, certain fish, fruits, vegetables, and sweet potatoes. That helped a lot. I felt better, but I was still having really bad flare-ups. So the next step for me was to go even more restrictive. And this is where I had to decide, do I remove meat and then go full vegan? Or do I remove vegetables and fruits and go full carnivore and lean towards a more carnivore approach? And the problem is when you look online, both these diets, whether it's raw vegan or carnivore, seems to work. There's so many testimonies of people having relief from their autoimmune issues that it makes it a little complicated for you to decide which one to follow. My hypothesis as to why both these diets seems to work is that both the carnivore and the raw vegan diet are elimination diets. So what is an elimination diet? It's a diet where your food choice is so restricted that you end up removing most of the food or all the foods that are triggering your immune system and causing a flare-up. It gives your body a break and time to calm down, basically. And usually these diets are done for a period of about 3 to 6 months. But some people do it for years, 2 years. Some people only eat that way for the rest of their life because of how good they feel. For example, you have someone like Chad Mendes, who used to be a UFC fighter who had really crippling psoriasis. And he went on a carnivore diet where he only ate beef for 4 months and his entire psoriasis cleared up. Then after that, he started testing out foods one by one, reintroducing them to see what was causing him to have a breakout or not. The ones that were causing him to have a breakout, he eliminated permanently. And the ones that seemed to be fine, he kept. And that's the thing about elimination diet. They're so restrictive. Personally, I would be scared to do that long term because I think I would become deficient, which is one of the reasons why, although I leaned toward a meat diet, I still kept the fruits. I will go into that a little bit later. But just the idea of just eating beef to me seems it's sufficient for my daily life and for the energy that I need. So why did I choose a meat-based diet, also called animal-based diet, to see if it heals my arthritis over a full vegan or raw vegan diet? Well, the simple first reason is when my problem started, I was 95% vegan. My diet consisted of lots and lots of vegetables, nuts, quinoa, pseudograin, buckwheat, and I would have like chicken and eggs maybe once a week, but that was it. It took me 3.5 years to realize that whenever I started removing vegetables out of my diet due to oxalates, my symptoms would get better. I had to go the opposite of what doctors were telling me because we're kind of told that a whole food, plant-based heavy diet is usually healthier. But to me, my experience was it actually made my condition worse. So I had to go the other way. Because when I removed vegetables, and especially high oxalate vegetables like sweet potatoes and spinach, for example, I immediately felt better. And that was confirmed by this book I read on oxalates called Toxic Superfood that says that an overconsumption of oxalates, which are mostly in plants, if you consume them for a long period of time, some people are fine, but a lot of people will have chronic issues. So the key is to remove those. And it was a process for me to do that because I was always convinced that veggies were good for me. So when I started to remove stuff out of my diet, I never even thought of removing veggies because I never thought that vegetables would cause me harm. And it's only when I got on a low FODMAP diet for gut issues, so it's a low fermentable food diet basically. It's a diet where you don't eat a lot of vegetables. And that I saw like a significant change, and then the less vegetables I ate, the better I felt. So this is what made me embrace a meat-heavy diet or an animal-based diet, basically. Another reason why I lean towards a meat-heavy diet instead of raw vegan, it's because I'm very physically active. And I just have a hard time believing that I can be healthy and have everything I need to perform if I'm only eating raw fruits and vegetables. I might be completely wrong. I'm sure there are some people that are thriving under that diet, but it just didn't seem appealing to me. And because of my past experiences with vegetables, I just didn't want to go down that route. On top of that, I have a hard time maintaining weight. I tend to lose weight very easily. So I know that if I have meat every day, I'm most likely to keep my muscle, possibly build muscle, than if I just have broccolis. And the last reason why I pick meat is because I enjoy eating meat. So in my mind, I was like, if I'm going to go on a restrictive diet and one of them allows meat, that's the one I'm going to pick. Again, this was still trial and error for me. I was like, let me try this for a month and see how I feel. I felt much better, so I kept doing it. So I am doing now an animal-based diet, which is not to be confused with a carnivore diet. Carnivore diet is like a more restrictive version of animal-based diet. So they eat meat, eggs, and butter. There's also a more restrictive version of that called the Lion's diet, where they only eat beef and water and salt. Now, the animal-based diet is the carnivore diet, but where you also allow honey, fruits, and fermented dairy, such as kefir or raw dairy. Now, there are some talks on whether raw dairy is safe for you or whatever. Personally, I do raw butter and I do fermented kefir. I try to avoid raw milk. I never liked milk to start with, so I'm not really bothered by not having raw milk. I chose the animal-based diet because the carnivore diet is just too extreme for me. I don't think I can spend a week just eating beef. I love fruits. I believe fruits are good for me. And I also love honey. So I was like, if I can have a little bit of joy in my life on a restrictive diet that is brought to me by a bit of honey or an apple, I'll take that. And to be honest, within the first week of getting into this diet, I felt immediately better. I'm now about a month and a half in. 85% of my arthritis is gone. So I'm going to keep doing that a little bit longer to see if it slowly goes away, especially from the book that I read on oxalate. It takes a month for oxalate detox to completely happen. So Yes, I still get random little flare-ups here and there, but they're not as strong as what I used to have. And it could also be part of the detoxing. So I'm going to keep doing animal-based for maybe another 4, 5, 6 months, as long as I can do it. And if I'm still having issues, then I might go into a full carnivore for maybe a month or two to see if it really helps. But for now, I stay on animal-based. I hope this video clarifies a little bit on the different diets that are out there to help. I hope it also helped you understand why I personally picked animal-based over a vegan diet. I think everyone is different, and it's really important that you do your own research and that you figure out what works for you. To me, it was about 3 years of trial and error, trying out this one, removing this food, adding this food back, to then figure out where I saw a real change. But I hope this video at least might point you in the right direction and that it helps you figure out what works for you. I personally am still learning every day. I'm still researching. My diet is changing pretty much every week, from little things that I add, little things that I remove. I think this is a learning process, and it's also a long process. The healing process is long, but I know I'm on the right track, and I hope this helps you as well.